Good morning. Today we're going to do some more practice with area and just getting really good with using those formulas and applying those skills. So I do want you to watch this first part before we get into like the actual notes, because I realized that there's something cool I could show you for the triangle formula that kind of helps me remember it a little bit better than just like, oh, it's a formula. So the triangle formula is area equals 1/2 base times height. Okay, so if I think about a triangle, let's just draw a really basic right triangle. Okay, so there's my right angle. Then this would be my base, and then this would be my height. Okay, the reason why we have this half comes from actually thinking about like a rectangle or a square. So if I just extended this and made another right triangle here, that would have the same height and the same base. Now I've created a rectangle, right? So the reason why this 1/2 is there is because really you're taking the area of your base times your height, which if I just thought of this as a rectangle, that would be the area of the rectangle, base times height, or length times width, however you want to think about it. And then, but if I'm only wanting this black triangle would actually be exactly half of this entire rectangle. So that's where the 1/2 comes from. So I thought I'd show you, and that kind of reinforces this idea of whenever I have to find the height of my triangle, that's when this altitude or this right angle is really important, okay? Because that's what's forming this idea of making a rectangle with whatever triangle we're using. So I thought I'd share that, and hopefully it's helpful in remembering the area of a triangle formula a little bit better. I wish we were in class because I have a really, really cool activity for a circle, and I might try to figure out how I could do that electronically. But I want to share this one with you about triangle. So going to our notes for today, you are going to be turning in number 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10. Okay, so this video is going to be me just going through 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, and 11, just to give some of you that extra practice that you might need and extra instruction. But looking at your quizzes from yesterday, or from Monday, they're really good. So I think we're pretty solid in this, and we might just need some more work on like circles especially, because I know those are kind of new. And then I really want to talk about number 11. So if you think you can do 2 through 10 without me, try it. And your quiz today will be a way to check and see if you're right. This quiz today will be worth 10 points again, just like yesterday's quiz. I want to give you guys some more points. And make sure you check out number 11. So if you want to fast forward to the very end where I go over 11, that's cool too. But 11's pretty different, and I want to make sure we know how to do it before we move on to tomorrow. So for number one, I noticed right away that I have 2 pairs of congruent sides, and that both of those sides look to be parallel. So I'm going to say this is a parallelogram. And if you have your note sheet out from yesterday or your reference sheet, then you can say that the area formula is base times height for a parallelogram. And the height is coming again from this altitude being formed. I'm recording. Anyway, so the altitude is 33, so that's going to be my height. And then the 21 is going to be my base. So for my area, it's going to be 21 times 33. Ah, that looks awful. Put parentheses around it. And 21 times 33 is 693. So the area of this parallelogram is 693. And I'm going to remember to put my units to be meters squared. Number 3 looks to be a circle. It is actually a full circle. So the full circle area formula is pi times r squared. And remember that r is my radius. So the radius is the distance halfway through a circle, which is actually given to me with this 2.9 feet. Okay, so that would be the radius. And again, if I went all the way through the circle, if I were to cut like this pizza in half, that would be the diameter. So green is diameter, yellow is radius. So radius equals 2.9. So my area formula would be pi times 2.9 squared. Okay? And that turns out to be 26.42 feet squared. So number 5, I see some parallel lines, it looks like, but I don't see any right angles. It's a four-sided shape, so right away I'm going to say this is a trapezoid. If I can spell trapezoid. And the area formula for a trapezoid is probably the longest and most annoying of all of them that I've asked you to use so far. But it's 1/2 times height times the bases added together. So there's two sets of bases. Those two sets of bases are going to be my parallel lines. So this could be base 1 and this could be base 2. And then again, reminder that the height is coming from that altitude being formed, or that dotted line that creates a right angle with one of the bases. So there's my height. So then area is going to be 1/2 times 32.7. Make sure that looks like a point. Times, and then my first base could be 38 plus 13. Okay, so 38 plus 13, I get 51 inside this parentheses, and then 32 times 7, or 32.7 times 2 times 1/2, jeez, is 16.35. So if I take 16.35 times 51, that'll give me the total area of this trapezoid to be 833.85 meters squared. For number 7, I noticed right away that I have two sets of congruent sides. So the 10 yards, 10 yards, and then 19 and 19. So it's kind of confusing to figure out which one of those would be your base in this shape. Well, I'm getting kind of ahead of myself. This is going to be a parallelogram. It's a parallelogram because those two sides are congruent to each other. The two opposite sides are congruent. And then they look like to be parallel lines, so they're never going to touch. Right? The 10 yards and 10 yards are never going to touch. They're going to go on forever. So then the area formula for a parallelogram is just base times height. Now, knowing where your base is the hard part for this. And the height sometimes, because sometimes the height's not given to you. But in this case, the height is given to me. It's, again, this dotted line forming this right angle. Okay? So there's my height. And then the base is always going to be what is making that base of the right angle. Okay? So notice how I can't use 10 as my base. 10 is not actually creating that right angle. The 19 yards is what's creating the right angle on this side. So 19 yards is going to be my base. So area is 19 times 7.8. And so that turns out to be 148.2 yards squared. 9 is super duper easy. It's a rectangle, and rectangles area are just length times width. So I'm going to say this is my length and this is my width. So area equals 16.4 times 11.8. Area equals 193.52, and then we're in feet squared. Okay, here's number 11. Number 11 is different because it's a triangle. We haven't had any triangles on this page yet, or in this video. And a triangle's area is formed by 1/2 times the base times the height. Okay? Hopefully you can see where the base is, but I don't want to draw it in just yet. But whatever you're thinking is the base is, I'm sure you're thinking the right way. The height, wherever, is where we run into issues. Okay, reminder that the height of any of these polygons has to be created by using what's called an altitude, or you're creating a right angle. Again, that right angle is coming from what we talked about here, that right angle is really helping to form that either rectangle or square, whatever you're working with. So in this one, we are going to have to draw in that right angle. So you want to be smart about where you draw it in, because it can be drawn in incorrectly. And if I look, hopefully you've noticed that this is an isosceles triangle because these two sides are congruent. So any triangle that has two congruent sides is called an isosceles triangle, which means this is my base. Okay, so from my base, I'm going to draw in an altitude, or that right angle, to be my height. Okay, so there's my altitude. Now, I don't know what this is. I'm going to call it X for right now. But if I look at just this triangle, isn't that a right triangle? Yes, Miss Jackson, it is. So I could figure out what X is by using the good old Pythagorean theorem, correct? So I'm going to take half of 26 to be 13, okay? And so if I just draw this triangle down here, this side would be 13, this would be my X, and this side would be 30. I can just use a squared plus b squared equals c squared to figure out what X is. X would be one of my legs because it's one of the sides that's making up that right angle. Okay, 30 is my hypotenuse, so 30 is c. So I'm going to have x squared plus 13 squared equals 30 squared. Okay, and when I solve for x, I'm going to square all my numbers and then subtract 13 squared from 30 squared. To get x squared is 731. And then I can take the square root of that to get x equals 27. So I'm just going to erase this x here real fast and actually put in what my height is, so it makes sense. Okay, so my height is 27 and my base is 26. So now I can use my area formula and actually figure out what the area of this triangle is. So area is 1/2 times 27 times 26. And I think I mixed up base and height, but it's okay. And then we get the area to be 351 centimeters squared. So the biggest difference with this one is, again, that altitude was not given to you. We're not going to do a ton of problems with this. Typically, I'm going to give you that altitude, but it's good to kind of remember Pythagorean theorem and how helpful it can be with a lot of these problems. It comes up a lot now, guys, so make sure you know how to use it. And the other thing with this is knowing that this was your actual base, and to split this in half to get that 13 centimeter side for my right triangle to solve for x. But yeah, I think that's all I'm going to say for now. You will need to do 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10 and turn those in on Canvas. Canvas is going to have like a quiz type thing where you can submit your answers and just check your work. I will say for number 8, those of you still watching, try to use pi. Do not use 3.14, okay? If you use 3.14, you're going to get an answer that's slightly off, and you might freak out because it won't be the exact same answer that I get, okay? But that's all I have. Hope you have a great rest of your day, and let me know if you have any questions.